Hi there, my name is Chelsea Seaburn. Welcome to the Smart Student. This channel is all about helping online college students in their online college programs. Today, I'm going to be giving you my best tips for proofreading your academic assignments. And so you know that you're in the right place, proofreading is all about fixing spelling, grammar, punctuation mistakes. If you need help with editing, such as the overall quality of your paper, the flow of your paper, making sure that you've met all your marks that you're supposed to, be sure to check out this video right here. But anyways, if you're here for proofreading, go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up and let's dive in. Did you know that it's virtually impossible to accurately proofread your own paper? This is because when you're writing, you're essentially painting this picture of something you have in your mind down onto paper. So when you go to proofread that paper, your vision is blinded by this picture you've created. In other words, what you see will look nearly perfect to your eyes because it was created in your eyes. Now, when someone else proofreads your paper, they don't see this picture, not yet anyways. Because in order for them to see what you're seeing, they have to decode your words first. By doing so, then they're able to visualize this picture you're conveying with your writing. This is why it's most effective to have someone else proofread your paper if you have the option to do so. So my first tip is if you can find someone else to help proofread your paper for you, go ahead and do that because they're going to be your best bet. If you can't think of someone who'd be willing to do this, something you can do is ask a fellow classmate to proofread your paper and offer to proofread theirs in return. Now, let's be real, this option isn't always feasible, especially if your paper is due tomorrow. So now let's go ahead and talk about things that you can do to effectively proofread your own papers. Alright, so tip number 1, you don't have someone to help you read your paper, so you should do the next best thing, which is to have your paper read to you using someone else's voice. How might you do that? I'm glad you asked. You would use a text-to-speech reader. And a text-to-speech reader is a software where you can upload your paper and use one of those automated voices like Alexa or say the GPS you have in your car to read your paper back to you. The best free online, easy-to-use text-to-speech reader that I know of is Natural Reader. You can simply go to naturalreader.com, drag and drop your assignment like this,
and it will translate your written words into spoken words. You can change the accent of the reader. So if I didn't like Sharon's voice, I could switch to Karen.
Pretty cool, huh? 1, I've included a link to Natural Reader down in the description, and 2, if you use Natural Reader, my pro tip for you is to slow down the speed just a little bit and listen intently while it reads your paper back to you. I actually suggest not looking at your paper while you're doing this because again, when you look at your paper, your vision is blurred by that picture you created. When you're listening to someone else read it back to you, you'll be able to spot grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes, missing words, and missing punctuations, which is extremely valuable. Now, moving on to my next tip, which is to put some time between your writing and your proofreading. Even if you're reading a text-to-speech reader, I still suggest at minimum to put a good night's sleep between these two processes. If you can manage a little more time, awesome. The goal is to look at your paper with fresh eyes. Because again, if you can't use someone else's eyes to proofread your paper, those fresh eyes are gonna be the next best thing. Now, moving on, this next tip is a proofreading 101 tip, and that is to simply print out your paper when you proofread it. I know not everyone has the option to print out their paper, so I have some tips towards the end of the video of how to proofread if you're reading from your screen. But the takeaway here is to print out your paper if you can and get a good old-fashioned pen ready to go. Alright, so you have your paper printed out. The next thing I suggest doing is using a straight edge, either a ruler or a folded sheet of paper, to help you read through your paper. This is going to force you to slow down and digest what you've written line by line. The reason for this is because when you proofread your own paper, you already know what comes next. It's just like rewatching a movie you've already seen before. Naturally, your brain is going to watch it much more passively the second time around because it already knows what's coming next. The same thing happens when you proofread something that you've written. your mind is going to read it passively. It's most likely going to take big snapshots of your page rather than read word for word. So using a straight edge will help stop your mind from doing this. All right, so it's time to read your paper. My next tip, I recommend whether your paper is printed out or you're reading it from the screen, and that is to proofread your paper out loud. It's just gonna hit differently when you read it out loud versus when you read it in your mind. And that's gonna help you uncover those details that you may not be able to see when you just read it in your mind. Just like how the text-to-speech reader helps you hear things that you can't necessarily see, reading your paper out loud will help do the same thing. When you do this, again, you want to slow down, but you also want to over-enunciate, meaning you want to really pronounce the syllables in each word. So when I used to proofread my papers, this step would sound something like this. So, students will return their bags and books to the dormitories and assemble in front of the castle to greet our guests before the welcoming feast. I didn't write that. But if you're a Harry Potter fan, go ahead and smash that like button because that's what that was from. Also, if you're finding value in this video, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. It's your guys' support of the Smart Student channel that allows me to keep making these videos, so thank you for being here. So moving on to my next tip, which is one that's going to help you if you really struggle with things like grammar, punctuation, spelling, you name it. And that is to put that pen to use by circling all the different punctuations in your writing. Now let me explain. So when you take that pen, preferably a red one, and you circle every period, for example, this is going to show you the lengths of your sentences, which will help you spot any run-on sentences, any sentence fragments that don't make sense, or even sentences that are too short and don't use proper grammar. When you circle your commas, you'll be able to see things like, are you using them properly? Are you overusing commas? Are you not using them enough? And then by circling apostrophes, this will help you see if you're using words improperly. I say this because that's actually the mistake that I commonly make still today, is that for whatever reason, when I type out the word your, I always type out you are naturally. I don't know why. You'd think it'd go the other way around. But anyways, this tip would help you if you have a similar problem. And that leads me right into my next tip, which is if you're unsure about something in your writing, Google it. For example, if you're using the word effect in your paper and you're unsure if that's proper form, go ahead and Google it. You'll be able to see if it's effect or effect. I've Googled full sentences before because I'm unsure if I'm using the commas correctly. Chances are what you're trying to say in your paper, someone has said somewhere else, or at least close to it, so you can use Google to verify words and even phrases. All right, moving on. Now let's say that you don't have the option to print out your paper. Like I said, no worries, there are still things you can do that are gonna make you effective in your proofreading. So first, you can still apply just about everything I just covered, but let's talk about some things that you can do differently. All right, so when you're proofreading from a computer screen, you still want to think about breaking down that mental image you have of your writing. And the way you're going to do that is by manipulating the way your paper looks. And the way you do that is by changing your font size. You can either zoom in on the page or you can literally change the font size while you proofread it. Next, if you really want to change the way your paper looks, you can change the font itself. I suggest simply bolding your text while you proofread it. So as you can see here, by zooming in on my document and bolding all the text within it, I'm forced to see my paper in a completely different way. It honestly looks like a different paper altogether. And then after that, I suggest using your mouse to slowly scroll up while you proofread your paper, because this is going to mimic the same thing you'd be doing as if you were using a ruler and a hard copy. Again, it's going to help you digest your paper line by line rather than taking it in big snapshots. All right, guys, I have one last tip for you, and this is something that you can apply whether you're proofreading it from a hard copy or you're proofreading it from your computer screen, and that is to proofread it backwards. Now let me explain. So this is hands down the most time-consuming way to proofread your paper, but it also might be one of the most helpful if you're someone who really struggles with spelling and grammar. Maybe spelling and grammar have never been your strong suit, maybe you're a returning student after a long break of school, or perhaps English isn't your first language. So I've proofread a lot of papers that come from students where English is not their first language, and I'll say this, it's very common to write out a word with one missing letter. For example, you write out a word that's meant to be plural, but you forget the S at the end of it. Or perhaps maybe you forget an apostrophe that should be included in a contraction. Something else that was really common is that maybe you just wrote the wrong word in your paper. There are a lot of words that sound and look very similar, and so it's easy to mix words up and put the wrong one in your paper. So again, while this method might take a little more time, it's a wonderful way to break down your paper word for word. And for the record, the better you get at proofreading, the less time you're going to spend proofreading. You won't always have to read it backwards, or you won't always have to apply all these different tips that I gave you. Eventually, your writing will naturally improve, so your proofreading will not take as much time. Speaking of improving your writing, again, if you haven't checked out this video right here, it's all about editing your paper, and editing is what focuses on improving the quality of your writing. So if you want to become a better writer, I highly suggest checking that out because it will help you get there. But in regards to proofreading, guys, patience is virtue. Take your time with it. There's nothing worse than missing valuable points for something simple like spelling a word wrong that you would have been able to correct had you slowed down. But anyways, thank you so much for being here. I hope you found value in this video. If you did, make sure to comment down below. Let me know what your takeaway is. It's your guys' interaction. I will keep saying it time and time again. That allows me to keep doing this. So thank you so much for being here. As always, give this video a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and of course, subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks, guys.